Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait a few more seconds for people to join. But in the meantime, I just wanted to start with some quick housekeeping. So first, this session is being recorded, and we will share the link to the recording after with everyone who participated. And you will be able to ask your questions using the Q&A function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. And you can ask your questions throughout the presentation. We'll get to the Q&A at the end, but you can start sending your questions in now. So I think we are ready to start. Okay, there we go. Can you all see the slides? Yes. So I just wanted to quickly go through the agenda for today. We're going to start with some introductions, and then we're going to have the presentations by our two speakers. We'll then go into a Q&A and into final remarks. I just wanted to start by telling you a little bit about Epigeum. As you may already know, Epigeum was founded within a university setting in 2005 and has been the leading provider of exceptional online courses ever since. Our courses are created to help universities and colleges transform core activities and are developed in collaboration with top universities to ensure that the content addresses current needs and requirements of the higher education market. This year, we are launching our programs in the American market, and we are looking for collaborators to join our development group for the Research Integrity US edition, which is what we're going to be covering in this session. So in terms of our speakers, first I just wanted to introduce myself. I am Maria Tissot, and I am Senior Marketing Manager for Epigeum. And joining me today, we have Professor Nicholas Steneck, who is Professor Emeritus of History at the University of Michigan. He's also the co-founder of the World Conference on Research Integrity and lead advisor for Research Integrity, the Epigeum program. And we also have Naomi Wilkinson today, who is Associate Director Publishing at Epigeum and is responsible for the publishing program. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and we can go into Nick's presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, are we sharing?
Yes.
I think yeses. Okay. I think it's probably both good morning and good afternoon. It's good afternoon for me, but I think it's good morning for some of you. I think I know some of you online, but probably not all of you. What I want to do is just tell you a little bit about the course today. It's one we've been trying, I've been interested in introducing to the US for quite a while, and for various reasons we haven't been able to do it until the present time. So let me see if my slides now work. Okay, so I'm going to give you some course background on the course, and then I'll be happy to ask questions later on. Let me start with my personal involvement in this field. I've been working with RI or RCR training for quite a few years right now. I began it actually in 1984 when I was asked to chair a task force on integrity of scholarship at Michigan. And they wanted to know what to do. And the obvious answer was, well, if you want to promote integrity, then promote education about research integrity and responsible conduct of research. So the basic recommendation that there ought to be training of some form or another in responsible conduct, that's been around for a long time. I actually moved into the online effort around 1995 when the University of Michigan tried to go online with a course and eventually did. For a while, I worked with the City Development Group, and I also worked with the Office of Research Integrity. And some of you may know the ORI Introduction to the Responsible Conduct of Research, and that was the first kind of nationwide effort I made to develop some materials. The planning for the Epigeum course began after the Second World Conference on Research Integrity, when one of the owners of Epigeum came up to me and said, would you like to develop a research integrity course for us? Which we subsequently did, and issued the second edition in 2015. And we're now up to where we're going to issue the third edition in a US version now this year. Why, after all that time, did I join the Epigeum team? Primarily because they were dedicated to delivering effective online training. I found that the online training efforts I was working with were largely not particularly effective. And what Epigeum was focused on was emphasizing engaged learning, encouraging university participation through development groups. They provided opportunities and space for institutional specific content. And while the other programs were focused on content and check the box, cover the rules, cover the requirements, create new courses whenever there's a new requirement, keep the courses as short as possible. And the emphasis was on too often minimizing the burden and not focusing on encouraging learning. And it's that emphasis on encouraging learning that Epigeum had, and particularly the founders, that drew me in at that particular point. They simply provided an opportunity to do more than I was able to do in other times. We did a mid-course adjustment. There were some flaws on our initial plan. The first course was too long and somewhat disjointed. It was written by 5 people, and I always said it was a camel and not a course. The institutions actually did not follow up and develop local content. Selling course files made difficult the process of updating the course. And so when we went to the second edition, we switched to a hosted version where we had better control, one author, so that I could shorten it and better coordinate it, much more emphasis on engagement. And as we move now to the third edition, I want to put more emphasis on this issue of engagement, bring it up to date by adding issues such as AI, paper mill, security, and think a little bit, and this is why we use the development, about how do we actually approach this learning. So the way the course is right now, our current course priorities and approach is we start with clear, organized content. And one of the things that I've stressed from the start, and I'd be interested in talking further about this if you have questions about it, is just first of all separating out integrity from ethics. Ethics is interesting, it's extremely important, but it's a different topic than integrity, which is essentially responsible conduct of research, doing what you're supposed to do. So that's what we focus in on the course. And the structure is built around, and it just flows through the normal research practice. So what is responsible practice? What is irresponsible practice? Planning, conducting, selecting, analyzing, publishing, professional responsibilities, public responsibilities, right on through the research process. And then we have 5 optional models on advanced courses: animals, humans, conflict of interest, and so on. So that's the content of the course. We can tamper with it, we can tinker with it a little bit, but that's basically how we approach it. Second thing is to engage the learners. My feeling is that unless somebody's sitting there looking at that screen is engaged, I'm not going to teach them anything. So I began this process of engaged learning when I started working with ORI. And I did something that ORI really was not comfortable with, and that is I put cartoons into the book. And I can't tell you how much time it took me to convince the government that it could put cartoons into a book. But things like the rules of the road as the introduction, or the, wow, does this happen often? Or I think we're ready to publish the results, as he's talking about a tech transfer agreement. Or good luck on your new job, as he's loading the data on the truck and the PI is standing up there looking at them. I had a very gifted cartoonist and illustrator work with me, And the whole idea was to capture attention before you went into the chapter. And that's what we tried to bring through, and what Epigeum helped me to do with the activities and other things in our current course. So an activity is everything on schedule for reporting your poster presentation? Simple presentation online? Well, not quite. I have some unreliable data, so my conclusions are not as robust as I was expecting. What do I do? No problem. Drop the unreliable data and add a note in small print of your poster explaining what you did. And of course, it then ends with, is this really a good idea? Is this good advice? The idea is it good advice? You know, what would you say looking at it, those of you online? That's how we try to bring people in and engage them in what's going on. We try to be field specific and provide contextual information. Fields are so different, it's difficult to do that completely, but we do have the field specific videos and activities. This happens to be an example of one where, how do you choose where you publish? Well, I start with my supervisor, and then I read the journals and I can see where the people are. And then, oh my goodness, one day I received an email saying, did I want to publish with these people? I said, oh my God, these people already recognize my research. And I sent that to my supervisors, and they said, no, don't do that. Don't submit. That's a bogus journal, and go on and so forth. Those experiences that people had, this one happens to be engineering, but it could be arts and humanities, it could be biosciences, is the way we try to contextualize what's going on in the course. And then we add poll questions in the course. A simple one, which statement best reflects your approach, how you approach your responsibilities? I meet all of my responsibilities all of the time, most of my responsibilities all of the time, and so on, down the range of things. You then vote, and this is what you see. Roughly 2/3 of people responding to the poll try to meet all of the responsibilities all of the time. Is that good news or bad news? 27% do it most of the responsibilities. 10% are, well, you know, I do it when I can, and so on and so forth. It gives the learners and the institutions some idea what the world of research integrity is like. And those are spread throughout the course. The other thing we try to do is stress practical advice, emphasize when and how to seek additional advice, point out the consequences of not seeking additional advice, and then helping learners understand that decisions about responsible conduct are not always easy decisions. So again, returning to the activities, did you read the new paper published by our competitors? They lifted parts of our work. We ought to report them for irresponsible conduct. What do you do in a situation like that? Well, it's clear. No, this is one of the risks of presenting papers. The abstracts or presentations are available, so your priority is more or less established. See if you can pull together your work, get it, that will make it seem like it's original. Is that right? This is a major breach of research practice, a clear case of serious misconduct. Or do you need to tell me more about the situation? And in this particular case, it's more about the situation. And we take the learners through, well, what should you have been thinking when you gave your presentation? What do you need to do to bring into misconduct investigation, and so on and so forth. So it's practical advice to how to deal with difficult situations. As we move to the development group, the purpose of the development group is to help us, and me in particular, as we now revise this course, to make it as relevant as we possibly can for 2024, 2025. One of the questions I want to talk to people about as we develop it is how do we balance a positive and supportive tone with the realities of research practice and the real life implications of misconduct? Do we start off with the bad news? Misconduct in the news, misconduct of forgotten victims, peer review and scientific publishing are faltering, trends in US public confidence in science. The good news is that science is going downhill, but not as fast as other disciplines. Do we talk about paper mills, predatory journals, and so on and so forth? How do we start the course at this point? And then we need to deal with the other questions. Are the poll questions are important? Could they be used to assess climate? Would institutions use them? What do we need to do about AI? Is it too soon for guidance? What areas do we cover? How rapidly will practices change? What do we do about assessment? We have minimal assessment now. How can we improve it? How can we measure the impact? Blended learning, is it important? What materials are needed? If we put in blended learning, what would you use? So that's what the development group will discuss as we take this course and reshape it into edition number 3 and make it an even better course than what I think we have at the present time. So I'll take questions, but I'll take them at the end. And with this time, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Nick. So I think we're going to now move on to Naomi's presentation. So when you're ready to share your screen, go for it.
Lovely. Great. Hopefully you can see my screen. Yeah, lovely. So SAGE's mission is building bridges to knowledge, therefore supporting researchers to do their vital work. Research Integrity is Epigeum's flagship programme and the leading online training in research integrity in the UK, Ireland and Australia. We've been working with Nick since 2011, as he mentioned, and subsequently we significantly restructured the second edition, which was released in 2019, while also working in collaboration with experts in each of our key regions. So we now have adaptations specifically for the UK, Ireland and Australia, but these are also used in Europe, Asia and beyond. And of course, we're now starting work on the US version. The programme offers comprehensive coverage of the principles, practices and responsibilities throughout the research life cycle. However, the training is also designed to promote cultural and behavioural change. So going beyond the tick box exercise, it really helps to set those higher standards from the very start of a researcher's career. I'll talk through the modular structure in a moment, but in addition, as Nick mentioned, we do offer suggested blended learning materials alongside the course. For example, they might include workshop session plans or discussion forum topics, and we're really keen to see how we can improve and develop these to meet the needs of universities in the US. The programme structure is intended to work for a global audience, but is also based on Nick's experience of US research practice and therefore remains an appropriate starting point for our US version. And while we've tried to divide the programme into the core and supplementary modules, the flexible structure means that universities can roll out the training in a way that suits them and as part of a broader suite of training and resources too. So the core modules cover responsible practices, irresponsible research practices, planning, project management, data management, publication, professional responsibilities, and social responsibilities. And then the supplementary modules address conflicts of interest, human subject research, animal research, intellectual property, and finally, the export control module at the moment will actually be expanded and refocused more broadly around research security. Part of Epigeum's USP is our collaborative approach to product development. So this model is where we work with institutions to develop our courses. The institutions who collaborate with us are part of what we call our development group, and they're experts in the field and are well versed on issues on the ground. In return for paying a one-off fee and collaborating with us on the programme development, they receive access to the course in perpetuity for their institution. Institutions that didn't join the development group will also be able to purchase a subscription to the programme on publication. And a bit more about the development group process itself. So the workshop kicks off the collaboration and involves our expert review panel, our development group university partners and Epigeum staff, and that's due to take place on Friday the 17th of May in Washington. The workshop will include discussions on the broad approach and tone of the programme, the module content plans, approaches to blended learning, module completion and quizzes, as well as implementation plans. After the workshop, we'll collate the feedback and provide a workshop report to document the key decisions made there, and then Nick will be getting started on writing that new content. The next stage involving the development group members will be the online alpha review, which is due to take place in August. So our expert review panel and our development group members will all have access to the first draft of the programme in its interactive format, providing feedback on the modules and being able to respond to each other's review comments too. The alpha review is an opportunity for the development group members also to involve other stakeholders in the review process, so potential end users as well, to ensure that the highest standards in our content and that we meet institutional and learner needs. There'll also be an opportunity for the development group members to put forward interviewees to be filmed for the video content in the modules, and that will likely take place around September. And then we'll be launching the US version in December this year. So, as we've mentioned, we are now recruiting for institutions to join the US development group, and we'll share the contact details for our academic partnerships manager in the US, that's Amy Binns, and she'll be delighted to follow up with anyone who would like to know more. And then finally, before I hand back to Maria for the Q&A, a note on our implementation approach. So, our courses are delivered via online platform, complete with reporting tools, and a senior learning consultant is assigned to each institution to support with the implementation. We also host community of practice events to connect you to a network of like-minded institutions using the programme. So that's it from me. I'm happy to answer any questions shortly, and meanwhile, it's over to Maria.
Thank you very much, Naomi, for that. That was really helpful. And thanks everyone for your questions. We had a few questions that came in through the registration form, so I'm going to tackle those first, and then we can get into the Q&A, the questions in the Q&A. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them. We will try to get to as many as possible today. So the first question that I would like to ask you is, how different is this version of the Research Integrity Program going to be from the other existing versions? I don't know who would like to tackle that question first, but I'll leave it open for both of you.
Well, let me start from the author perspective on that, and that is that we've just updated the UK version at this point, so we've already added more on security, we've added more on AI and other things in it. So we've already done a fair amount of updating. The obvious thing that has to be done for the US course is all those places where it says the UK policy on misconduct is X, those have to be adapted to the US. So it will be completely adapted to whatever the appropriate US policies are. My approach to regulation has been, as much as we can, is to get an overview of how a problem is approached globally, and then talk specifically about how a country approaches it, and if it's necessary to go down to the institutional level, to go down to the institutional level. So all of that rewriting for the US will be done. And that's why we have a development group that helps us make sure that that's all up to date as much as possible. And those are the things that we can update fairly quickly. If something is wrong or rule changes, you can make a small change without too much trouble. After that, it depends on what the development group thinks might be the best way to serve the US community. Is it different from the UK community? Is it not any different? So for example, the UK has a very strong central document called the Concordant that all universities adhere to. There is nothing similar in the US. There are 16, whatever they are, funding agencies, there are different policies and so on and so forth. So what approach we take is going to depend a little bit on what will work best in the US market. And I'm not going to say any more because some of the other questions get into what other things we can do. But to some extent, the simple answer to the question is structure, I think, will remain mostly the same. Content will be US specific as much as possible. And then we will tinker where we need to fit with the US market.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. The other question that had come in the registration form was, why are most research institutions reactive, not proactive in regards to RCR in general? What should be done?
I assume, Naomi, you don't necessarily want to take that question.
I'm definitely going to leave you with that one to start.
Yeah. It's a puzzle. I mean, it's obvious why the universities are reactive. And looking at the online, there's a question online that essentially says, how do you get the attention of a vice president for research who's in charge of this at this point? Because that vice president for research is judged on the basis of research volume, publication volume, and so on and so forth. So that's a primary concern. If you look at most major universities and probably a lot of smaller ones, they spend an enormous amount of funding on publicizing their research, showing how good it is, how important they are. Every research university is building the size of its research program. We all know that research budgets aren't increasing as fast as universities say they're increasing their programs, which means everybody is trying to raid from everybody else's research funds at this point. How do you get in at that point and knock on the door and say, wait a minute, you need to do more about research integrity? I think the news is in part doing that for us. We've had 2 presidents in the US get fired or dismissed over the last year as a result of concerns about their research practices, and they've spread to other institutions. So it's no longer a simple thing that will not impact your university. And what one needs to do is to just get across the message that showing what you're doing to promote integrity, other than saying we set the highest standards for integrity possible with no evidence behind it, is important. And I think if you came in and said, well, wait a minute, we took a look at our training and we decided we'd go with a better RCR course. That's what we're doing to promote integrity, and so on and so forth. But it's a challenge. I understand that. I mean, it's why we recommended training 40 years ago, and I'm still at it, and I haven't succeeded in getting it established to the extent that I'd like it to get extended. But there are things in this course that I think are important, and one of them are the 2 of them are the activities where you go through a series of questions and answers, because those can be brought down into a classroom and used for in-person training. There's no reason why you can't build a course around the discussions that begin with this course, with the online course, and bring them into the classroom and talk about them. There's no reason why you can't talk about the poll questions in a course. You can easily pull this information down and use it in your online presentations. And you can use it when you go in and talk with a research administrator and say, look, only 2/3 of our people say they're really trying to do their best. 1/3, we'll do whatever we can. Is that good enough for you? What happens if that goes out to the press at this point? But it's a tough battle. I understand that. But getting involved in a good research integrity program such as this, I hope, and I'm biased, obviously, I think might be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think you've kind of covered one of the questions that came in, but someone was asking about the NIH's RCR in-person requirements and whether the program would offer interaction in a way to meet those standards. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, if the NIH program is interpreted literally as you must sit in a classroom and you must have someone teach you for 8 hours, then the answer is no, that won't work for the NIH requirement unless you were to say we use the Epigeum course and it has 8 modules. And we have a dedicated leader who starts with module 1, and there's a 1-hour session, and we talk about that. And then we go through 2, 3, and 4. That would satisfy the 1-hour training. Beyond that, the NIH has said in-person training is important. I'd rather not comment on whether I think that's effective or not. I can tell you I've sat in on some of those sessions, and I've sat in on those sessions that begin with, okay, what are we doing here? I don't know any more about this than you do. I'm the junior person in my department, and somehow I got assigned this training. Now, that might be very cynical, and I know there are excellent RCR instructors out there who do an excellent job of it. The problem is there isn't enough of us around to actually do effectively what NIH wants us to do. But the bottom line is, yes, you could use this to build the program, but no, you got to find somebody who's going to spend 8 hours in person doing this to meet the requirement, unless NIH changes or does otherwise.
But I think, as we were also saying earlier, currently we do provide kind of session plans, discussion topics, as documents that kind of go alongside the program that universities can use. And we're really keen to kind of work with our development group universities to see how we can develop those further, not only in terms of the kind of documentation that might help you run those sessions, but also we can work with our implementation specialists that's assigned to your university to see how they might help you in terms of planning that rollout and implementation of the course as part of that blended approach.
Yeah, and just it's what we need is feedback on what would be useful to those institutions that are buying in. The assumption early on, and ORI did this and others did it, was that if we posted more material online, articles, books, all that sort of stuff, that would do it. That would provide the guidance that people wanted. And all of a sudden, there was overload of materials, but not a lot of guidance on actually how to use those materials. Now, I know there have been efforts to try to improve that situation, and that's what we're going to try to do with this course as well.
Yes, that's a good point. There was a question that came in earlier on the content of the program and whether the content is relevant to all disciplines or if there is a focus on any particular area. I don't know who would like to tackle that question, but is there any particular area that it focuses on?
You can't, if you follow research integrity in the news, in the press, and so on and so forth. There isn't any doubt that the biomedical, the medical are getting the most attention right now. A couple of years ago, the social sciences got a lot of attention for the lack of replication. Replication has now become a big issue. So the focus has to be, or naturally is, on those areas that have received the most attention. I'm a historian, and happily, history has stayed out of the news for the most part, although I know there's a case brewing right now that might not be the case. But so do we have a major emphasis on history? Well, no, we don't have a major emphasis on history or art history or things like that. So the focus has to be on those areas that are now getting the most attention. But as much as possible, I hope that somebody sitting in an ethnology class or something like that would come away with, well, there's some things for me to think about, or how do I bring it back into my setting and talk about it? That's what I'd like to see people do.
Mm. And I think Nick has worked really hard to design this program in terms of, a lot of the content is around the kind of fundamental knowledge and skills required for all researchers. But in the actual activities, for example, we have various different options within the activities so that you can look at whether it's a case study for a particular discipline or whether it's an activity relevant to specific disciplines, so that the users can kind of choose their journey through the content as well.
I recently got a message from Epigeum asking for my vision for the course, which I haven't done yet. I still owe you the vision statement, but I was thinking about it, and my vision is, for a number of years, my wife and I taught a course on the history of the University of Michigan, and the students would come in and say, I've had a lot of trouble here because I keep nattering on with my roommates and others about all the things they don't know about the University of Michigan. And they're getting tired of me doing that. I wish our students who took the RCR course would go back to their labs and say, wait a minute, we haven't talked about this. We haven't discussed that. So as you go through the course, a number of the activities are beginning a project. Everybody's together. And what they're not talking about. One of the activities is how many things should have been talked about that weren't talked about in that opening session. That's the impact I would like to see. I don't care about them going back and listening to some senior person just give views on it. I'd like to see them talk about and discuss with others what's going on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. I think we have covered all the questions that we've received. I think, Nick, you had answered the question on the chat regarding leadership level. So I don't know if there was anything else you would like to add to that. I know you just covered it when you were answering a different question, but if there's any additional points you would like to make, this is a good point for it.
I have one other point I'd like to make. I was talking with a colleague in Ireland the other day, and we were chatting about how do we get universities to do more. And her response was, how do we get them all to jump at once? Nobody's willing to really step out and say, boy, we're really going to put a lot of money into a research integrity or responsible conduct of research training program. They're not going to do it. And that's the question, is how do we turn that tide? And I know from the meeting in DC, the APPE group is trying to do that, to show what should be done. And this course is just one more effort to try to turn that around and bring a different attitude to RCR training now in the US.
Thank you. That's really good point. And unless there are any other questions, I think we will end there. So I'm just going to very quickly share my screen with some additional information. Let me just see if that works. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, great. I just wanted to thank you both for your presentations, and thanks everyone who attended. We hope you found this useful and that we have answered some of your questions. If you have any more questions, you can always reach out to us. If you are interested in joining our Research Integrity Development Group, you can get in touch with Amy, who you can see there on the screen. You've got all her details. And you can also visit our website to see more information on the program and what we do. We can share all these links after the webinar when we send you the recording as well. So thank you very much for your time today, and we hope to see you all soon.